For those of you who are not familiar with the Voidpet games, it's a Pokemon-inspired series that also includes emotions. You have void pets like sad, angry, and greed. Each pet has up to 5 evolution stages, some have 6. The co-founders Linda Chen and Ben Awad both established the Voidpet journey in 2021. Linda was the artist and created all the original art for the Voidpet's intellectual property, while Ben would handle the majority of the game coding. There are Voidpets and NPCs, but we'll touch on the NPCs later on. Suffice to say, tens of thousands of people would join the Voidpet community on Discord and Reddit, but the developers would drive away even their top spending players. When I say drive away, I mean the developers are actively banning people and censoring the players of the community. Just when you thought things couldn't go more downhill from there, display names are forcibly being changed, volunteers are stripped of roles and responsibilities, players are being publicly shamed, and someone even got doxxed. Who is at the center of all of this? None other than the developers of the game themselves. Before we jump into all the crazy shenanigans, I'm going to start by building a basic timeline for us to follow and slowly introduce you to people important to the bigger picture. For the purposes of this video, we're going to primarily focus on Voidpet Dungeon. Linda and Ben wanted to create a game that would compete with Pokemon while helping people cultivate mental health awareness. Linda would go on to become the face of Voidpets by sharing TikToks and Instagram reels of what Voidpets are. This would lead to the creation of a web browser game in 2022, a sort of beta test, if you will. Then in 2023, the first mobile game would be released known as Voidpet Garden, which focused on the player's mental health. Then in 2024, the second game known as Voidpet Dungeon would be released, which focused on combat and strategy. In 2023, Linda and Ben were able to secure up to $1 million in funding from Andreessen Horowitz's Speedrun Gaming Accelerator Program, or A16Z Speedrun for short. The A16Z Speedrun program was created to find and fund first-time businesses or early-stage companies. The parent company, Andreessen Horowitz, is also known for investing in AI software and cryptocurrency. With the $1 million funding, Voidpet Dungeon would go on to release in November of 2024. But before we go any further, we're going to have to rewind history just a bit. We are going to start off this section by looking at a timeline Ben created for us back in 2024. In July 2024, a person in the Voidpet Discord would eventually be banned. People were wondering what was the reason for the ban. Who banned them? We will refer to this individual as Redacted. Ben would go on to release an announcement on the Discord server and the Reddit forum about 3 major events that occurred. The first thing Ben addresses is replacing the entire moderation team. The second thing Ben brings up is the ban of Redacted. The final event that Ben addresses is the ban of multiple Discord accounts. From here on out, this event will be known as the First Purge. The ban of Redacted is the first topic we'll touch on. Prior to the other events happening, the developers stated they were interested in using an in-game font called Delulu. Somehow the dev team was unaware of the meaning or connotations related to the word Delulu. Ben goes on to say that several players would basically say that using Delulu for the font would be a terrible idea. The dev team responded by saying they would do more research into the word Delulu and come to a decision at a later time. Ben would eventually come to find that there was a thread called Situation Takers. This thread would consist of a few mods and a few players in the server. They would all discuss their dissatisfaction with the development of the game, and Ben was oblivious to all this until he saw someone named Redacted. This individual would eventually be banned, and people were left wondering who banned them. Before we proceed with the rest of the timeline, I want to point out something a bit fishy. What we just discussed was happening in 2023, the choice to use the Delulu font and the banning of Redacted. Now, Delulu is a slang term referencing a sometimes humorous but mostly sarcastic way of saying delusional, and this was added into the Urban Dictionary website as early as December of 2016. The reason I bring this up is because surely people in 2024 would know what Delulu meant by now. And here's why I do not believe the developers when they claim to not know that Delulu has negative connotations. There are two pets in the Voidpet lore known as Cringe and Sag. I'm not entirely too sure when these two pets were brought into existence, but for the sake of this timeline, we're going to assume they were both entering Voidpet Dungeon at the same time. In the Urban Dictionary, cringe is when someone acts or is so embarrassing or awkward that you experience secondhand embarrassment or shame. And cringe was given a definition as soon as February of 2017. Sag has at least two well-known definitions in the Urban Dictionary, with both definitions indicating a feeling of being sad and depressed, or a combination of the words sad and cringe, respectively. Sag is primarily Twitch or livestream slang, but it was added into the Urban Dictionary as soon as September of 2020. So stay with me here. Sag was popularized in 2020, cringe was popularized in 2017, Delulu was popularized in 2016. I have a hard time believing the developers had zero idea that Delulu had negative connotations to it, but let's assume the dev team had zero idea about what Delulu meant or what connotations surrounded Delulu. The community members of the Discord server were voicing their concerns, saying that it was a bad idea to use a font called Delulu. The first thing I would have done as a developer is do a quick Google search for what Delulu meant. In fact, I did that when making this video and found the Urban Dictionary definition instantly. Now, Ben states that there were a lot of negative comments left by Redacted, and that's ultimately why they were banned, and not solely because of the Delulu situation, but that's how the issue began with Redacted. Well, what happened after Redacted was banned? Some moderators would speak up on behalf of Redacted, asking why they were banned so suddenly and without warning. Ben would respond by saying Redacted had a history of spreading negative thoughts around the server, and that was not the kind of online culture the dev team wanted to cultivate. Even with that being said, the mods would double down and defend Redacted by saying the jump to an immediate ban without proper warning was too severe. There were guidelines to follow when banning a member, and that they were keeping their comments within the relevant thread. The moderators were in a standstill with the developers. Neither side was budging. The mods believed the ban was unfair and unwarranted, while the devs felt the ban was completely justified. I highly recommend you take a moment to pause and read the next few screenshots because they go into greater detail about the dispute between the two. Regardless of the conversation at hand, the damage had been done, and the ones to take on the backlash would be the moderators. people noticed that Redacted was gone, and the mods were left to handle damage control. Everyone was asking who banned Redacted. No one was willing to believe that a developer would be the one to execute the ban. Now, members of the community felt like they could not say anything without having someone keep an eye on them the entire time. If they said anything that might be misconstrued in any way, then they felt like they would be banned at any moment without a notice. Trust within the community was broken. Ben would later make a private channel for the mods and devs. Ben would make the decision to unban Redacted and added why the developers wanted to part ways with the moderation team. To quote Ben, "In the future, we are not going to attempt to police negativity. It is frustrating to see misinformation and lies spread in our server about the actions and intentions of the dev team. The crux of the issue is that we have clearly lost the faith of the moderation team. We no longer feel like we are working together as a team. We as devs feel undermined regularly by the moderation team, which makes it clear that changes are needed. It is not fair to expect you all to defend us when you don't even support our vision to begin with. We realize the issue is not that various individuals have negative opinions on Voidpet. It's actually that the mods agreeing and giving credence to theories and opinions that paint the dev team in a very poor light spurs distrust. Going forward, we are going to be replacing the entire moderation team from the ground up." And that was that. The mod team was no longer on active duty. Effective immediately, the mod team was let go. Except the mod team was the one soaking up all the confusion and distrust from the community, and then given the boot from the dev team. That's one of the most painful anime betrayals if I'd ever seen one, but since the entire mod team was going to be replaced, who's going to take all the blame now? The dev team would eventually put out a mod team trial to create a brand new team of moderators. There were select members of the community who were deemed acting moderator material. Once the trial period was over, the dev team would choose who they wanted as full-time moderators. But the devs made one little mistake that ended up costing them a lot of time and would result in their first public apology to the moderation team. You see, after the mod trials had finished, Ben had forgotten to get rid of the mod trial role. Having this role allowed the temporary moderators to edit, remove, and add just about anything to the Discord server. New message channels were being created, new threads appeared, people were given moderator authority, so even more people were joining in on the chaos. The unfortunate thing is that people were sending NSFW content into the server. Eventually, the dev team would finally wake up to pandemonium and have to fix things. They were removing the mod trial role, removed and added back text channels, got rid of NSFW content, and started banning people who participated in the chaos. Rightfully so, the devs and official mods were upset at the way people were behaving, but people were acting out because they were upset at the lack of communication from the developers. The players knew that the moderators, past and present, weren't to blame for everything, and they felt the devs weren't doing anything to address how upset the players were with how Voidpet Dungeon was developing and how one of their own players was unjustly banned. I don't think this was one of the best ways to get the dev team's attention, but it worked. Or did it? In this segment of the video, we are going to talk about 3 particular individuals. First will be Redacted, second will be Redacted's friend, and third, we'll call them Stan. On the 23rd of July in 2024, Redacted would reach out to their friends and tell them that they and Redacted's friend were being harassed on Tumblr. Stan wanted to defend the developers of Voidpet Dungeon, So they first targeted Redacted's friend and found out that Redacted's friend was a minor at the time. In this message, Redacted is confronting Stan and asking why and how they were even able to pick their friend as a target. Apparently, Stan used a music bot in a past mutual Discord server to get information about users, and picked Redacted and their friend because of past conflicts they had in a separate server. Stan would post on Tumblr saying that if Redacted didn't like how game developers handle their work, then they should just leave and stay away, even mentioning that Redacted's friend is a minor in a hashtag. Eventually, two ex-moderators would reach out to Ben through the memo channel in the Voidpet Discord to remove Redacted's name from the public announcements because of the harassment Redacted was receiving. Ben would eventually update the Discord announcement and the Reddit post removing the original person's name, which is why the banned person's name is listed as Redacted. But it all could have been avoided if Ben had done some damage control from the get-go and not name-dropped to begin with. Ben unintentionally got two people doxxed, one of them being a minor. And if you look closely in Stan's direct message to Redacted, Linda is being referenced. Stan says, "The axe is for you and the troll ganks you sent over to a certain server because you couldn't possibly fathom a game developer working her ass off to make a brand profitable. If the axe digs up fellow shitheads in the process, then so be it." I am all for independent developers working hard to create a unique brand that they can make a living off of, but I draw the line at doxing. As far as I know, Linda did not get involved with the replacement of the moderation team, the banning of Redacted, nor the First Purge, so it stands to reason that Linda never got involved when Redacted and Redacted's friend were doxed. I could be wrong about that, and I welcome it, but so far, I know I've been speaking the truth. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is it really considered doxing? Absolutely, it is considered doxing. Let's read the message Stan wrote to Redacted one more time. Stan says, "If my little friend or music bot was still in the server, then I could get my proof to the world, but alas, you are lucky I have only my word of mouth to go by." I'm sure Stan is referring to Redacted's open criticisms in the Voidpet server, since Stan also shared another mutual server with Redacted and Redacted's friend in the past. Stan apparently had another friend and a music bot from a past server that was able to cross-reference social media profiles and was able to single out Redacted and their friend. Stan was ready to use that information maliciously. That hashtag in Stan's Tumblr post mentioning Redacted's friend being a minor, and the direct message containing a threat to publicize personal info are signs of doxing and malicious intent. The damage had been done already. Although removing Redacted's original name is preventing further doxing, this situation alone could have been avoided altogether if Redacted's original name was never publicized to begin with. Ben also never apologized for publicizing Redacted's name. Whether or not Ben and Linda had any idea about the doxing, they've already taken the steps to filter out the people they didn't want in their community. They've already replaced their mod team, banned people who, in their opinion, were harassing them or writing negative comments in their Discord and Reddit, and made an announcement about why Redacted was banned from their Discord. However, the aftermath to all of these scenarios share one common fact. It's that the dev team was ready to get rid of anyone that they deemed a problem. Speaking of getting rid of people, back during the First Purge, Ben stated that players were only banned for distributing NSFW content and spamming messages. Ben appears to have a different definition of what spam is. I say this because there were past mods who explained to Ben what spamming is, and that the bans made during the First Purge were unjustified when claimed to be spam. Let's look at a few examples. One moderator explained that spam is sending the same question or sentence, or even just a word, repeatedly. Another mod goes on to say spamming implies repetitively sending harmful or irrelevant messages for the purpose of just being antagonistic. To further drive home their point, they quote Ben and respond to the quote, "Even amidst the chaos, no users were banned for their opinions. However, that's exactly what the moderators and many users were banned for. Although you tried to state that the moderators were entitled to their opinions, it was juxtaposed with the mass demotion of the staff. Entitlement is the privilege to act a certain way or do something without consequences, which the staff certainly had consequences." Let's remember that Ben apparently doesn't ban people or demote them from mod to regular member just for their opinions. But on the 1st of August 2024, a Discord member by the initial Z would be banned for speaking out and asking why another member, J, was banned since the 22nd of July. Ben would eventually say that J was banned for spamming and Z was banned for spamming and ban evasion. Server members and moderators were speaking up and clarifying to the developers what spamming really was and trying to explain as to why the bans were unprecedented. But none of that mattered since the devs banned them and deleted all their messages from the server, so nothing could be traced back to them. To make matters worse, 2 more server members were banned shortly after. One was for changing their nickname to "The Devs Are Censoring Us," and the other ban was for leaving a parting message about their disappointment in the server and the developers. So not only are the 2 devs, Ben and Getter, actively banning people, but they're also censoring what people have to say by deleting every trace of a person's existence on their server. With this, I've only gone over a small portion of the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who fell victim to the First Purge. The Second Purge was even more recent. On November 1st, 2025, Voidpet Dungeon would receive an update to begin celebrating its first anniversary. This update would introduce the higher form of the Voidpet, Sloth. Higher forms are the super rare meta best in slot upgrades to a Voidpet. How do you acquire these higher forms? Well, there are 2 methods. The first method is using mushrooms to acquire the higher form. You see, there are 3 different types of mushrooms. These mushrooms unlock upgrades for your void pets called vivids. Each vivid is correlated with an upgrade towards your pet. Oh, and even if you already have that vivid, you can still acquire the same one. Each mushroom is of a different tier as well. The only way you can acquire a higher form is if you use the 2nd tier or 3rd tier mushrooms. The 2nd tier mushrooms are pretty rare to come by. The only ways to acquire these are by leveling up the Battle Pass, which has a free and a paid version, or reaching certain milestones such as collecting 4 epic fighter pets or collecting 2 epic healer pets. Mind you, collecting void pets is completely random chance in this game, so you have no immediate control or persuasion over your odds of reaching some of these milestones except sheer luck or if you choose to spend large sums of money. Are you still following along? It's okay, we're going to move on to the next mushrooms. The first tier mushrooms are the creme de la creme of mushrooms and are rarely acquirable through event rewards or the premium battle pass. The only reliable way to acquire these mushrooms is to buy them with real currency. The price will vary based on your country, but individual first tier mushrooms cost $5 and the highest offered package is $32, giving each mushroom a $4 value. Now let's say you have your Voidpet that can reach a higher form. You have a stockpile of mushrooms ready to take a chance at the gacha system. And you start rolling your odds, but you run out of mushrooms before you're able to get the higher form. Well, when you acquire duplicates of Vivids that you already have, you acquire another in-game currency called Vivid Dust. Each Vivid you receive a duplicate of will give you various amounts of Vivid Dust. This Vivid Dust currency acts as a pity system. When you collect the proper amount of Vivid Dust, you can exchange your Vivid Dust and receive the Vivid you want. In this case, we want the higher form, but the higher form costs 8,000 Vivid Dust, and you only have 4,000. That means you need to stockpile even more Vivid Dust before you get that ultra rare, super strong higher form. But wait, we're not done yet. On November 1st, 2025, the developers would announce that the cost of higher forms would double from 8,000 to 16,000. And the drop rate for higher forms would be cut in half. The second tier mushrooms would drop from 0.2% to 0.1%, and the first tier mushrooms would drop from 1% to 0.5%. Players became outraged that the strongest of the strongest Vivids were becoming even more rare to obtain. Your chances of acquiring higher forms just dropped in half, and you had to spend twice as much money to get them. But wait! The current event allows you to collect eggs that will give you the Voidpet Sloth. You're only guaranteed to get 2 free Sloth eggs just by logging into the game. The rest you have to buy. Well, each individual Sloth egg costs $4. If you buy the most expensive egg package at $60 US, each individual Sloth egg will be worth $3. How many eggs do you need to open to guarantee that you'll get Sloth at all? Well, thankfully, when you reach the pity or the minimum amount of eggs needed to acquire Sloth, you'll also be graced with the higher form of Sloth right away, thanks to the limited time event dedicated just to Sloth. How many eggs do you need to hatch? 300. That's $900 US to guarantee that you get higher form Sloth. And each egg only has a 0.5% chance of giving you higher form Sloth before you reach the 300 egg pity. But that's not even the worst part. Yes, it's absolutely insane how much money and resources you need to spend just to get higher form Sloth, or any other higher form for that matter. But what's really upsetting is how bad higher form Sloth is. Higher form Sloth is the third higher form to be introduced into the game and was introduced to kickstart the first anniversary of Voidpet Dungeon, but it pales in comparison to higher form Greed and Lust. Greed and Lust are both amazing damage dealers who can carry you through multiple levels effortlessly, even if you were given average equipment. However, their higher forms escalate their damage output through the roof and make them some of the best in-slot damage dealers, easily triple S rank. Sloth, on the other hand, is such an abysmal void pet that most players opt to use a different pet as a tank. Sloth is there to soak up damage as a tank and live a very long time, but Sloth, as a legendary pet, was losing to epic rarity tanks in terms of survivability. Surely, receiving its higher form would boost Sloth to triple S rank like Greed and Lust, right? Wrong. Higher form Sloth's Achilles heel is that it's insanely slow. Sloth needs equipment that increases its defense and health points so that it can live longer. Since that's the case, Sloth is painfully slow and never actually gets a turn to use a skill in a turn-based strategy game. There is a way to circumvent this issue. You can equip Sloth with a pirate hat, which brings it 20% closer towards its turn every time Sloth takes a direct attack. That's a great way to make higher form Sloth viable. The problem lies in acquiring the pirate hat. Every day, you have 10 keys that you can use to either gain experience to level up your pets, or use to gain items from boss fights. Once you use your 10 keys, you could buy more keys using gems. The first time you buy gems from the shop, you get double the value. After that, the value goes back to the original offer. So if you're buying the lowest tier package, you'll get 160 gems for $1 on the first time purchase, or 80 gems for $1 after the first time purchase. If you want the highest tier package, you'll get 28,000 gems for $100 on the first time purchase, or 14,000 gems for $100 after the first time purchase. Gems are used for everything: buying gems, hatching eggs, buying vivids, and more. I brought all this up because now we're getting into the game-changing part of Voidpet Dungeon, the equipment. Each pet has 4 item slots: 1 hat, 1 necklace, 2 accessories. The best items are the legendary items because they're the only equipment that have effects, just like the pirate hat you want for Sloth. Some items can turn pets into double S or even triple S rank among their rarity. In fact, with the right build, epic, even rare pets can compete against legendary pets. Remember how I said your equipment comes from fighting bosses? Well, you get to fight bosses for free at most 10 times a day. Each boss drops different gear, and you can check what each boss drops to make gear farming easier. The biggest downside, however, is that there's no drop rate listed anywhere. The game doesn't tell you what your odds are of acquiring the gear you want, nor is there an open source website where you can find out this information. But wait. The developers decided to recently add a pity system for equipment farming. If you have an item at max ascension, you can start gaining item dust for future ascensions. How do you ascend an item? Well, you need the item piece first. After that, the first ascension acquires 1 copy of the item in question. Then the second ascension requires 2 copies of the item, and so on and so forth until you reach Ascension 10. After Ascension 10, any future ascensions will result in you acquiring item dust, which works similarly to vivid dust. The difference being that you need 5,000 item dust to redeem, then you'll receive a random legendary gear piece. Unlike with the vivid dust, you don't get to choose what legendary gear piece you want. Oh, and I should mention that after Ascension 10, you still need 10 copies of the item to keep ascending the item. The Ascensions will give you item dust instead of upgrading the gear. So now you have an idea of just how many RNG-based systems there are in this game. Everything is based on sheer luck and continuously grinding. Can you be free to play and stay that way? Absolutely you can. You never have to give money to Voidpet Dungeon if that's what you choose. Just know that your progression and materials you stockpile will happen at a very slow pace. We're going to shift gears and talk about a different game for a moment, but I'm only bringing up a different game for the sake of comparing how to properly celebrate an anniversary. There's a gacha game I've been playing called Nikke Goddess of Victory, and they recently celebrated their 3rd anniversary. I know most of you might just know Nikke to be a fan service game that's full of butts, boobs, and feet, but the developers have done a great job with not only celebrating the game, but also celebrating their player base. Every anniversary, we receive a free SSR character, gem currency, tickets to summon for more characters, extra copies of the free SSR character, and we get more than 220 free pools for characters. When the anniversary comes, we also get 2 new character banners to summon on. They are both separated by 1 week apart when releasing, but you get a free pool every day during the anniversary. Not only that, we got a 3rd banner that lets us choose from one of 3 characters released over the years to pull for. So if you're a new player or missed them in the past, you get a chance of getting them now. Oh, and when you summon for the new characters on the anniversary banner, you accumulate mileage and can claim rewards like more tickets to summon and materials to upgrade your characters. You'll even get extra drops from doing certain game modes during the anniversary. Look at this cool little background too. This is a screenshot, but everything in this image moves in the game. The balloons, the blimp, and the fireworks. Little things like this are what make an anniversary feel like an anniversary, not whatever the Voidpet developers are doing. Since Higher Form Sloth released on November 1st, people were voicing how outraged they were about the higher forms becoming more expensive and more rare to acquire. Someone would go on to create the biggest thread the server would ever see. This thread received the most upvotes and most interaction because people wanted their opinions to be heard. People were genuinely curious why the developers wanted to make such a terrible change to the game. You would think that the developers would celebrate the game's 1st anniversary with the entire player base hand in hand, but the devs decided to only give us 2,000 Vivid Dust and made it harder and more expensive to get the most rare pets in the game. That was it. That was our thanks for supporting them for an entire year. Genshin Impact had a more generous 1st anniversary than we did, and their own community felt their anniversary gifts were inadequate. This is not a call out to offend the Genshin community in any way. I'm just trying to relate to all of you and say that we understand how you all felt during those dark times, and I hope you all can relate to us during these difficult times. People were clearly upset. Can you imagine waking up to the anniversary of a game you genuinely enjoyed, only to find that the developers made it harder for you to get the pets you wanted? It would be like going through high school, but in order to graduate, you actually have to stay another 4 years before you get your diploma. That's what happened. And to make matters worse, the developers were nowhere to be seen during the launch of the anniversary. When the day arrived, the developers made a post on Discord announcing the arrival of the 1st anniversary and what changes they were making. After that, radio silence. There was not a single developer in sight, even though they were all technically online on Discord. I was there! I saw the developers online. They had the green icon right next to their profile pictures, but not a single developer was responding to the masses. The only ones trying to respond were the moderators. The player base would ask the mods if they knew why the developers would decide on making such terrible changes to the game, and the mods could only say they had no idea why these decisions were made. And you'll never guess what happened after that. History repeated itself. The developers were upset that the mods were not actively defending the dev team. Remember during the First Purge how the developers felt undermined by the mod team and needed permission from the developers to make any statements? That's exactly what happened here again. The mods were trying to do damage control, and the devs were mad the mods weren't actively saying that the dev team wouldn't hurt the player base. It would take a full 24 hours before a statement would be made by the dev team, and the dev team would only make a response because the moderation team put together a list of questions they wanted answers to. Let's go over what the developers had to say for themselves. You can also pause the video at any time to read the statements for yourself if you'd like. They would start by saying that higher forms are meant to be the ultimate long goal in Voidpet, something that takes months of progression, effort, and dedication to achieve. If higher forms were too easy to obtain, it would reduce the sense of accomplishment and make earlier progression feel less rewarding. We understand the increase felt sudden, but it was important for maintaining long-term balance and for giving us room to create more fun and powerful higher forms in the future. Reading that was pretty difficult, to be honest. I don't know in what world any of that actually makes sense, but it's obvious making something more rare and more difficult to obtain is clearly a way to get people to spend more time and resources in a game. There's honestly no sense of achievement when acquiring the strongest assets in the game are all locked behind random chance, and there's no sense of achievement when you aren't even given a fair chance to get those assets. It'd be one thing if you could use gems to roll for legendary pets at a fair chance, but you can't even do that. Your only real option to get better drop rates is to use real money. That's what pay to win is. But let's return to the rest of the dev team's statements. When it comes to supporting both new and veteran players, the devs said, "We always want higher level players to feel valued and never punished for progressing in the game. Some improvements, however, are not possible to apply to all players or are intended for new players only. Over time, long-term players should continue to see greater rewards and benefits that reflect their dedication and experience." The reason the developers bring up new and veteran players is because once you beat floor 1000, you are guaranteed a legendary item drop. This was actually not implemented until this past October, and some people had already climbed past floor 1000. These were the veterans who asked the devs if they would get anything for having passed floor 1000 already. But the devs were radio silent for an entire month, and just now letting players know that nothing was going to be done for them. This is honestly just a big slap to the face. If I were a veteran player, I would feel like my dedication to the game was not very rewarding. Nor did I feel a sense of achievement because of what the devs said, or didn't say. For the pity system, our events are not designed to guarantee the featured pet to all players who participate. Part of what makes a legendary feel special is that not everyone will get it right away. Our goal is for legendary events to create a sense of anticipation and celebration while still offering other meaningful ways for all players to progress and strengthen their teams. Honestly, this is all just bad. If you, the developers, want people to have FOMO or fear of missing out, then you're doing a great job of it already. Making legendary event pets, especially higher forms, locked behind a paywall is probably the biggest sign that says, "Give us money." That honestly wouldn't be such a problem if higher form Sloth was actually viable with its own skills and not reliant on a legendary item on top of the insane $900 pity. It's all bad. Next topic. For balancing and pet viability, the devs said, "Our goal is for all pets to be viable and for pets of every rarity to have a role, even in the endgame content. We feel the current balance supports this, and we regularly review both player feedback and in-game data to keep things healthy. Our balance updates will consist mainly of buffs and occasional bug fixes going forward." We'll see how far into the future you'll all get without making nerfs to some pets, because the devs are really well known for nerfing pets and changing the meta to be shaped around having higher form pets. Also, the devs like to look at player feedback, but a lot of times the feedback is deleted or completely glossed over, and we'll touch on more of that later. The devs address the leaderboard, but they don't actually say anything meaningful about it. The devs end the statement by saying, "Going forward, we're focused on adding social features, new ways to strengthen your void pets, and expanding both early game and end game content. We're also continuing to improve language support so more players around the world can enjoy the game." It's clear that the devs have new projects and tasks they're working on, but dragging on the player progression is the worst way to stall the player base. That is no quality of life. Expanding your brand and getting new players to join the game is great, but you have to fix the foundation of the game itself before adding more players just to boost your online numbers. I'll say it again, there has been zero quality of life update that's made the early, mid, or end game progression better. Even the devs admit that they want things to drag on, so you feel some sort of accomplishment, but that's not true. Your top spending players are even upset, and you just banned them from your server. Speaking of which, now that we have all the prerequisites laid down, we can start getting into the actual wave of bans. The first person to actually get banned made a meme about Getter, and this would lead to a domino effect of other people who would get banned. Here's the actual meme. This is Getter wearing a shirt that says, "I hate Voidpet player base," and the players are calling him Cheddar instead of Getter. Honestly, it's such an elementary level insult, but it must have hurt because the creator of this meme was banned almost immediately for sharing this self-made meme. People would start calling Getter Cheddar just to rub salt in the wound, and as a result, players would either get banned for calling him Cheddar or banned for mentioning that someone was banned. If you thought the bans only lasted the first or second day of November, you'd be wrong. All the way up to the 6th of November, and probably more after that, people were still being banned. Granted, some of it was for trolling and memeing on the developers, but I can understand why people were doing this. I'm not justifying people's actions, I'm just saying that I can reason with why people are trying to get a reaction out of the devs. But let's take a look at some of these messages that led to bans. I'm also not going to list these bans in any particular order. I have a backlog of bans to go through, so if I forget to include you in this section of the video, then I'm apologizing in advance. Let's actually start with the Cheddar meme. This meme would actually kind of kickstart the wave of bans to come. People would henceforth call Getter Cheddar, and it clearly rubbed the developers the wrong way and led to a string of bans. If people asked why someone was banned or mentioned that someone was banned, then they would also receive a ban, like this person who we will call Thing1 for the remainder of this video. Thing1 would ask a question and tag Cheddar instead of Getter. Someone would go on to confirm that Thing1 was banned without a stated reason, and people would start speaking up on their behalf, saying things like, "Wait, they're actually banned? Holy." Come to find out that someone else was also banned shortly after. This person we'll call Thing2. So we have Thing1, who was banned for addressing Cheddar, and now Thing2. Thing2 was banned for saying justice for Thing1. And people were in denial about it. They actually asked, wait, did Thing 2 genuinely get banned over a Justice for Thing 1 post? But it was all true because people would back up the story. Thing 2 was banned for saying Justice for Thing 1, and someone entirely different was banned for saying Cheddar. Honestly, banning someone for the Cheddar name calling is probably logical. You could say it was bullying. I think it's pretty elementary bullying, but it's reasonable to say it's bullying. But Justice for Thing 1, I actually can't fathom why the devs would ban that. The only thing that might come to mind is probably spam messages, but it's not like people were saying Justice for Thing 1 repeatedly in every single channel. People were trying to speak out on the injustice done onto Thing 1, and the devs were furious at Thing 2 for using 3 words to speak up against the injustice. And if you thought that wasn't bad enough, the moderators were also being banned for speaking their minds. Here's a direct message between Getter and a moderator. Getter would start by saying, "This is the kind of comment I don't like seeing. You were stating something as though it were a fact. Because you are a mod, some players might think you have inside information or that this statement has any basis." The mod would respond with, "Okay, but do you see why people are this upset, myself included? I've poured countless hours, and I don't even know how much money at this point, into your game, for it to get worse, not better." Then, completely unprompted and without furthering the conversation in a constructive way, Getter made the executive decision and said, "I removed your moderator role, but you are obviously still welcome in the server." Before we go on, I just want to establish something so we're all on the same page. Moderators are not paid for their time, nor were these particular moderators ever compensated for their time or efforts. If someone tries to refute this claim, I ask the mods myself. Here's the proof. So if you somehow still think that mods shouldn't have behaved this way, and was justified in having their mod role stripped, just remember that these are basically volunteers who were told to stop acting like they know everything and then told they couldn't even volunteer anymore. These moderators are members of the Voidpet community. Some have played since day 1. Some are even some of the biggest spenders in Voidpet Dungeon. For the player base and the mods to be treated like they can be removed at will when it's convenient for the dev team is absolutely disrespectful. And if you thought that was it, you'd be wrong. A second time. Getter would add on saying, "I removed the rule because of the dictator comment, not because of the messages you sent me." A dictator comment? That's a far stretch if I'd ever seen one. This last statement from Getter is a clear example of how the developers treat their player base. The developers repeatedly display a pattern of disrespect and inappropriate behavior towards its player base. And since we're on the topic of Getter, let's take a look at Getter admitting to banning the player base. Someone would make a comment about how the player base is only dogging on Getter and not the mod team, followed by someone commenting how Getter is the only one of the devs actually speaking up. Then Getter would finally respond by saying he's the one that has been banning the player base and that no one else was to blame for the bans. Some players couldn't believe that a developer would feel so strongly about everyone's opinions that they would ban players for speaking their mind. But to some people, it didn't matter which developer was banning people. The game was still doomed to fail because of the new changes implemented by the devs. All these bans and failed game updates would lead to so much backlash that even another game developer would give their 2 cents and say, "I'm a game developer designer too, and I still can't think of any possibilities as to why they made such decisions during their anniversary, especially their first. Like, do they just want their game to flop?" I honestly think this quote speaks for itself. If another game developer is able to gauge just how the developers of Voidpet are mismanaging their own game, then I think it's safe to say that Voidpet has a very rocky future. Also, remember how there are basic guidelines set in place to discipline the player base? Before banning someone, a person will typically receive a warning or timeout. If that person is a repeat offender, then they'll receive a ban, but that's never been the case in the Voidpet server. This is a screenshot showing the history of bans, or all the bans that have occurred most recently in the server. This particular screenshot shows that Getter banned someone without a specified reason. Maybe Getter chose to not fill in that section out of pure laziness, or maybe Getter chose to not fill it because he thought no one was going to see the ban or question the ban. Here is the player's message in question. This is the message that led to the ban of the player in the previous screenshot. I mean, maybe the wording came off aggressive or not constructive enough. I'm not sure what the qualification is for a bannable offense since the dev team seems a bit trigger happy. But I think it's safe to say this player didn't say or do anything that was offensive to any other players. The only ones who were sensitive to this player's statement was the dev team. This player would also receive a ban for typing too much in text channels. There isn't a chat history to go over because the messages were all deleted by the developers. However, the likely reason would have to be that the devs saw this player's messages as spam and therefore banned them for sending too many messages. Honestly, I'm also guilty of sometimes typing one sentence at a time in text messages and sending them sequentially, but that's just because my fingers move faster than my thoughts sometimes, and I want to add more to what I have to say later on. I think it's astonishing that the devs just want to ban people for talking a lot and keeping their server active. And this player would be banned for bringing up how in-game names are being censored and changed against their will. This player would speak up on behalf of their friend and ask the devs why the friend's display name isn't showing up as it should on the leaderboards. Just for reference, these names were all displayed on the leaderboard at one point. The number 1 player changed their in-game name to Devs Banned Me. The number 4 changed theirs to Devs Killed VPD, and the number 6 changed theirs to Devs Cheesefire DX. And if we look at the last screenshot, their names have all reverted to what they once were. That's a clear sign of censorship if I'd ever seen one. I understand it's bad publicity if your top players have some unsavory display names, but they also did it to get the dev team's attention in hopes for actual meaningful change that would better the community. However, the devs decided to go in another direction and silence the top players, the top spenders of the community. Can you imagine owning a game, players giving you thousands of dollars each for an entire year, and you slap them with your silence and you silence them? Just imagine that for a moment. Like, make it make sense. How does that phrase go? Don't bite the hand that feeds you? The devs heard us all loud and clear, and they chose to silence everyone. Now, $1 million for a small indie company to utilize is no laughing matter. There are plenty of indie developers who would love to have that kind of backing. However, accepting $1 million from a company that's known for investing in AI and cryptocurrency does make me skeptical, if even the slightest. And as far as I know, Voidpets is not involved in any kind of cryptocurrency, but we all know how cryptocurrency has a bad reputation with scammers, money laundering, and Ponzi schemes. So the fact that Ben and Linda accepted a $1 million backing from Andreessen Horowitz is concerning and makes me question the legitimacy of how much thought and care was actually put into Voidpets. While AI does have its positive uses, it has a negative connotation in the creator space. Whether you're an artist, musician, content creator, or anything that requires individual creativity, your own unique artistry is what separates you from the other creators. Linda was able to garner a wide following on social media when she was starting out with the concept of Voidpet, but given the circumstances, we have to ask, Have the developers used AI in the creation of Voidpet? While I don't have a direct answer to that, Ben has been spotted using AI to answer his player base. A player was asking for help when using their Apple account to log in to Voidpet Dungeon, but they were having problems figuring out how to switch Apple accounts since game data is synced with whatever account you log in with. Ben decided to answer using a screenshot of a ChatGPT response. I will say in Ben's defense that he did attempt to help the player at first, but I think there was a communication problem because they couldn't figure out a solution between the two of them. But prior to this blatant and open usage of ChatGPT, players were already questioning the legitimacy of Discord announcements since they also seem to be AI generated. Remember how the developers responded to some community questions and gave really upsetting answers? That announcement in particular is rumored to be AI generated, but I can't prove or disprove that claim. I will say that the usage of bold letters and numbering each topic is pretty on par with how ChatGPT also writes, especially if we're using Ben's example of a ChatGPT response. Linda also made a TikTok in July of 2022 featuring AI. This looks like a compilation of pictures as to what void pets would look like if they were made with AI. And they look like abstract creatures personified with nature as the primary theme. I do think it's a bit suspicious to have AI brought up among the developers as early as 2022, but I'll leave it up to you, the viewer, whether you think the developers have a habit of using AI. Now, there's a lot more that I can go over. Things like how the developers claim to have a small budget, but just recently hired 2 new developers to help with debugging Voidpet. Or we could even dive deeper into the First Purge and see what really happened during the Voidpet dungeon's rise to popularity. I want to see how this video does before throwing more things at you, the viewer. But overall, I'm satisfied with my first attempt at this type of video. I want to say this again just so that we're all on the same page. Please do not send any comments that would bully or harass any of the developers or any of the people mentioned in this video. If you feel compelled to say something, I urge you to go about it in a healthy way. You can give the game a review on their respective game stores, join the community and talk with the player base, or leave a comment on this video. Your voices and your opinions matter, and I hope the developers come to learn that these are the voices and opinions they should start listening to if they really care about their future as developers. I know some of the moderators in the Discord server have been working as a collective to help bridge the communication between the player base and the developers, but I still think there's room for improvement when it comes to the developers actually caring about their player base. Before you click off the video, I would like to thank all the players and members of the community that helped provide me with information for this video.